This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, folks. So we are here doing our lab. We should have been on campus remotely due to the icy weather conditions. So let's, tonight we're going to start off with looking at endocrine histology. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the endocrine system as far as histology is concerned. In the lecture on Wednesday, we will be going into and finishing up and reviewing the autonomic nervous system. The chapter right after autonomic nervous system will be the endocrine system, and there'll be quite a bit of information that we'll be covering regarding that system. So here in the lab, we're going to be looking at the histology and looking at the different slides that you will have to identify as far as the specific types of tissues. Now know that as we're looking at this image right here, we'll see that we have the pituitary gland. Know that the pituitary gland is right inferior and anterior to the hypothalamus. And we'll see this tonight on the sagittal head. And that it is connected to the pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis, right? Now, know that the anterior pituitary, the adenohypophysis, the posterior pituitary, the neurohypophysis, okay? When you're looking at the tissues here, it's connected to the hypothalamus via the pituitary stalk, aka also known as the infundibulum. Let me pull up. Let's see here. I'm going to show you on an extension of this. I'm going to give you those terms because I think you'll appreciate those terms for me to give you here as far as the term hypophysis. And we want to make this bigger. So hypophysis is also known as the pituitary gland. Okay? And we're looking at the anterior pituitary is the adenohypophysis. The posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis. So as we're looking at this here, folks, know that hypophysis refers to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus via the infundibula, which is also known as the pituitary stalk. Okay, so hypophysis, terms you need to know, the adenohypophysis, and the neurohypophysis. So if you have a moment, you want to write that down, please do. Okay, you should always be taking notes while you're in any type of go-to-meeting, any type of lecture situation, while we're in the lab. Okay, adenohypophysis, anterior pituitary, neurohypophysis, posterior pituitary. So adenohypophysis is glandular. The tissue. Neurohypophysis is neural tissue. Okay. This. Okay. All right. So, and this is important as far as when you see the staining and such, this is going to help you to understand and realize what's going on as far as the images that you're looking at. So let's minimize this and come back here. So we see that the Adenohypophysis, the anterior pituitary stains a darker purple, whereas the posterior pituitary stains a lighter stain. Okay, this neural tissue stains lighter, looks different than the anterior pituitary tissue, which is glandular neural tissue. Okay, let's look at, now that's a 100 magnification. 400 magnification, you'll see here as far as this would be the posterior pituitary, it's lighter stained. Darker stain would be the anterior pituitary. So that's pituitary tissue, okay? So here we see pituitary tissue. The pituitary gland, folks, this is what we would consider the master gland. So the pituitary gland would be the master gland. The hypothalamus would be considered the master controller of the pituitary gland, because that really has ultimate control over the autonomic function. So as we are going to be in the autonomic nervous system on Wednesday and discussing that chapter and that system, know that really it transitions well into the endocrine system as far as that hypothalamic control over what's taking place in the endocrine system as far as the release of hormones. And the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary, very important as far as the hormones that are secreted as well as synthesized in those areas. Posterior pituitary only releases hormones that are sent to it by the hypothalamus. They don't produce, posterior pituitary does not produce its own hormones, but anterior pituitary does. And we'll talk about this in quite a bit of detail. So you'll see here that the next tissue that I chose to look at would be the thyroid tissue, okay? Folks, thyroid tissue is very unique in its presentation, okay? If you'll see over here, just looking at these little spheres, right? And you can see here, we've got these spheres of tissues, okay? This is the area where we have colloid, and this is the precursor for thyroid hormone, okay? And then we'll talk about in the lecture regarding what the parafollicular cells produce, but it's not thyroid hormone. Okay, so we'll talk about calcitonin. We'll talk about parathyroid hormone, which is not produced here, but in the tissues adjacent to the thyroid gland, and how the hormones produced by the parafollicular cells as well as the parathyroid cells gland, it really has the opposite effects on what takes place as far as calcium ion levels. So thyroid hormone produced here, it's colloid region, okay? And you'll see here that you see these multiple, let's take a look for a moment at a image where you'll see, wow, okay, so now you're looking at that. This is a very unique looking tissue, okay? It's probably the easiest one that you'll be able to identify as far as the endocrine system is concerned. And so you'll be able to really very much notice how we have these, and I like to think of them like they're little, it's like a little pool. It's like a little pool full of this colloid, right? And what happens is that throughout all of these, right, we're releasing thyroid hormone, and it's going to then be released. Thyroid gland, highly vascular, right? Highly vascular, because thyroid hormone is a major metabolic hormone. If we have too much of it, your body's jacked up. If we have too little of it, it's like you're running in slow motion. So really, thyroid hormone is a major metabolic hormone. We'll discuss that in more detail, but if you just look at this image right here, very distinct from the other tissues. Thyroid gland, thyroid tissue. Now, you'll see here that we have that very distinct thyroid tissue, and then we see this other tissue that's adjacent to it. Well, if we think of the thyroid gland and the other tissue that is adjacent to it would be the parathyroid gland, as I mentioned before. And so if we notice right away, hey, that's thyroid tissue, well then it's got to be parathyroid gland, okay? So even if you were just seeing a little cross section of this, yeah, so you can see here thyroid tissue. Again, even if you see just a little cross section of this image here at a higher magnification, as long as you see parathyroid, as long as you see thyroid follicles and such for thyroid tissue, and you see another adjacent tissue, and I ask you, what is this tissue? It's easy, because that parathyroid gland, parathyroid tissue is adjacent. They have 4 little oval type structures that are on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. Take a look at this here. And what you're looking at over here is that you can see the anterior, looks like a butterfly, okay? You see the anterior portion of the thyroid gland, inferior to the thyroid cartilage right here, thyroid cartilage, and really larynx, because this is your voice box, this whole structure in through here, larynx, okay? But here are the posterior aspect of the thyroid tissue. Here we have those parathyroid glands, folks, okay? Here's another image right here. Parathyroids amidst the thyroid tissue, okay? So thyroid, parathyroid, and thyroid. Then we have the adrenal glands. Now the adrenal tissue, this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge in order to identify this tissue. But here's something I can tell you. When you think of the adrenal gland, just as we thought of the hypophysis, the anterior posterior pituitary, the adrenal hypophysis, the neural hypophysis, there is adrenal, there is glandular tissue and neural tissue for the hypophysis. Well, in the adrenal gland, we also have neural tissue as far as the adrenal medulla, the very core portion of the adrenal gland, and then the outer portion, the cortex, this would be glandular tissue, okay? And there's a capsule that encompasses, and that you can see on the histology slides, the capsule of the adrenal gland. And then what we're going to see, folks, is that, let's see if this one has it here. Yeah. So there are zones, there are levels, there are areas within this cortex, okay? There are zones, there are levels within the cortex. There's the glomerulosa, reticularis, and the fascicularis, the fasciculata, glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis. Here we go, GFR. Glomerulosa, see how it's this area that is adjacent to the capsule, okay? The fasciculata is the inner portion of the tissue. This is all cortex. And the reticularis, this is the inner tissue that is adjacent to the medullary tissue, which would be neural tissue, okay? Because what's going on, folks, is that this neural tissue, guess what the adrenal medulla releases? Epinephrine, norepinephrine, okay? This is the area where that's released, and we'll discuss as far as the other hormones that are released within the cortex. There are a few in particular that I would like you to know, but as we look at this image here, you go, okay, so how am I going to differentiate between the the glomerulosa, the fasciculata, the reticularis, the GFR, okay? GFR. Well, here's the deal. If I point to the area that is not the capsule, so this outer layer, that's the capsule. So if I point to an area that's adjacent to the capsule, glomerulosa, these are zones, these are layers, levels, okay, zones, glomerulosa. If I point to an area adjacent to the medullary region of the adrenal gland, then it would be what? The reticularis. If I'm in the middle, then you're thinking about the fasciculata. Do you see that here? If I'm pointing, here's the capsule. See that capsule? It's distinct. So the three zones, glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis, here's the medullary region, and you can see the difference as far as the tissue is concerned. It looks a little different. It's a little different, right? So I will do all that I can. If I want you to identify this zone, the glomerulosa, I'd point to very close to, but not on the capsule. You know, if I wanted the capsule, I'd point to this structure out here. What is this structure? The capsule. But here, very close to the capsule, glomerulosa. Here's the medulla, medullary region, that neural tissue. And if I point here, reticularis. And so anything in the middle, fasciculata. Okay. So that's the adrenal glands. Okay. They sit on the superior poles, the superior aspect of the kidneys, bilateral. And then lastly, as far as the tissue, we have pancreatic tissue. Now, pancreatic tissue, what you'll see is that primarily, right, it's going to be it's going to be more of an exocrine, EXOCRINE, exocrine tissue. This exocrine tissue is involved in producing enzymes and secretions for bicarbonate, enzymes for the secretion, for the function of the GI tract, for the digestive system. So exocrine tissue, okay? Now, look at this tissue right here. This would be endocrine tissue, the pancreatic islets. You'll see one here, you'll see one here, okay? You can see here, that looks also like the pancreatic islet. Let's show you another image. See how this is distinct, right? This oval structure from the other structures here. This is all exocrine as far as for digestive system secretions, and then only a small portion would be for the endocrine system, these pancreatic islets. Let's take a look at an image. And here we go. This is a good image. This is an image that you can take a look at, and you can see what they're trying to show you here. Let's save this image. Let's expand it a bit. Beautiful, right? So you'll see here that these little blue flowers like that you're seeing right here, that represents the endocrine tissue. All other aspects of the tissue, that's not these little blue dots, would be exocrine in function for the actual digestive system function. As far as, like I said, digestive enzymes, bicarbonate, that's all going to be released as a result of this pancreatic duct. Okay, and there's also an accessory pancreatic duct that you're not seeing on this image. But anything else, folks, it's going to be these little dots again will be endocrine right here. That's in pancreatic islet, or an Isle of Langerhans is another term that was used, that can be used. Okay, and again, the pancreatic hormones, insulin and glucagon, for the regulation of what takes place as far as blood glucose levels. We'll talk about that in more detail. All right, so this would be a pancreatic islet, aka an Isle of Langerhans. It looks like a little island amidst this exocrine digestive function tissue, exocrine tissue, endocrine tissue. Okay? So quite interesting, right? How many of these tissues have combinations of different types of tissues, right? So that depending upon the function and depending upon the origin, so embryonic origin would help us to understand that we see here as far as neural tissue, glandular tissue. Okay? Glandular would be the adenohypophysis, the anterior pituitary, neural tissue, the posterior pituitary, as well as the medullary region of the adrenal glands, neural tissue, the rest glandular tissue, the cortex. Here we go. The cortex, glandular tissue, neural tissue. Does anybody have any questions before I move on, as far as after having reviewed the endocrine histology? So these images have been posted up there already. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say if I could just take a look at them one more time for about like 10 seconds each to take a quick picture. But if you've already posted them,
No,
then
these are already posted. Yes, so you're good. So they're on documents and resources. You're
Fantastic.
good.
Thank
You
you.
have them, absolutely no problem. And my suggestion to you also is that, so I might not post the exact same images, but I will post images that are approximate, that I'll pull from the web and that I have in my database as far as for testing purposes. Understood? So I would go to Google Images, Google, and then Google an image for all of these different types of tissues so that you can see multiple representations of them, labeled and unlabeled, so that this way you can practice and figure it out. Okay? Very good. All right, so now let's go over into, we'll do neurology right now, as far as the, first we'll look at the brain, as far as the sagittal head is concerned. And so here, let's make that bigger. And so all I did was I just went online and just looked for an image that was unlabeled so that this way we could practice with it. Let's make it bigger. Yeah. Bring it down here. Good, okay. So as we're looking at here, we can see that this is, and really, please take advantage of this image here that was posted by Skylar from last semester. If you increase this image here, folks, really cool as far as what she's done. Let's see, yeah, there you go. As far as giving you all of this information, right? So that you have that as far as information that you can refer to, okay? So really helpful. Now there we go. All right, so as we're looking at this image here, so we have here, this would be the right cerebral hemisphere, right? Because we're missing the left side, so that's the right cerebral hemisphere. Not this part in particular, we're going to label as the cingulate gyrus right here. Remember the gyrus? A gyrus is a fold. A sulcus would be an indentation, right? So here we have the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum connects both cerebral hemispheres and allows for communication. So really we know that because of this crossing over of fibers, that the right cerebral hemisphere controls left side of the body, the left cerebral hemisphere controls the right side of the body, right? We'll see here, this is the septum pellucidum. And okay, after I go through this image, I'm going to show you the ventricles of the brain. And we're going to see two ventricles right here, as far as this area would be considered third ventricle. This is the cerebral aqueduct, and this would allow cerebral spinal fluid to go from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle, right here, anterior to the cerebellum with its arbor vitae, these tree of life, okay? Now, present within this third ventricle, we have the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus, and we have this choroid plexus that you're viewing that produces the cerebral spinal fluid. And this would be, again, comprising the third ventricle, okay? Right on this posterior aspect we have here, this would be the pineal gland, aka the pineal body, produces melatonin, one of the aspects, the hormones allow you to be sleepy as it gets darker outside. We have here then also the corpora quadrigemina. This would have a superior and inferior colliculi or colliculus. There's 4 areas here, 2 on the top, the superior, 2 on the bottom, the inferior colliculi. You don't have to label that. All you need to know is this is the corpora quadrigemina, just giving you a little bit more information. Superior colliculi deal with visual input. The inferior colliculi deal with auditory input, okay? And as far as you, like, if you hear something on one side of your body, your head will automatically go to that side. That's a part of that inferior colliculus working, okay? Just working with visual and auditory input, okay? The corpora quadrigemina. Right anterior to it would be the cerebral peduncles of the midbrain, cerebral peduncles, the pons, the medulla oblongata, the spinal cord, okay? And know that this fourth ventricle, there is a canal here, the central canal of the spinal cord, that will actually allow for then cerebral spinal fluid to pass in through that canal, through the spinal cord, as well as bathing the spinal cord, okay? Let's go to the anterior aspect here, and we have here the optic chiasm, right? The crossing over of where we have the optic nerve, then crosses over, and then we have the optic tract. There's the optic chiasm. We have here the hypophysis, or the pituitary gland, with its infundibulum, aka the pituitary stalk, and lastly, this is the mammillary body, inferior to third ventricle, which houses the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Okay, so that's that sagittal head. Let's see.
Did you post the labeled version of it?
I think it is already. Yeah, but
Okay.
I'm almost 100% positive. I'll check before, but I'm almost positive. See, this is labeled also. So this is that Skylar posted this image here, and I think I do have another one that is labeled also. But if it's not, I can post that for you all. Okay.
It's under Unit 1. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's in Unit 1. It should be in Unit 1. Okay.
Sure,
Now let
thanks.
me get out of. some of these images here, and then I will just show you the eye and the ear. Okay, let's look at eye anatomy. Okay, so take a look at this image here as far as okay. So first off, folks, as we're looking at this image here, right? So this would be a right eye. So here you have the nasal bone. So here we would have the white of your eye would be the sclera. The clear portion that is an extension of the sclera, which would be that fibrous tunic, would be the cornea. Cornea. Okay? It's the clear portion here. You need to also recall and remember that we have the different extrinsic eye muscles, right? That you'll see here as far as here would be the superior rectus, lateral rectus, and you'll see here that also just a piece right here in white, and it goes from lateral to medial. It comes across, and this would be the superior rectus, superior oblique, sorry. Superior oblique is superior rectus, superior oblique muscle, and here would be, see right here, this portion, and right here would be the inferior oblique. They both come from lateral and go medial, okay, as far as those muscles are concerned. I'll show you another image right now as far as it'll have them cut. Okay, so here we have an image where you're seeing, so here's that superior oblique right here, comes across, and it goes medial. So from lateral to medial. Here's the inferior oblique coming from lateral to medial. And then we have here the inferior rectus, the superior rectus, the lateral rectus, and the medial rectus. Okay, and there are multiple images here. So let's take a look at this one. Here's so this would be right eye, and here's also the right eye, but the right eye with the structures of the skull removed. So here's the right eye looking at the lateral aspect. Here's the medial surface of the right eye. Okay, so we have the right eye, the medial. So then this would be what? Medial rectus, inferior rectus, superior rectus. Here would be that superior oblique. You're only seeing a little portion of the inferior oblique. But here on this side, lateral aspect of the right eye, here's superior oblique, comes across from lateral to medial, inner portion of the eye. You have here superior rectus, lateral rectus, inferior rectus. And here's the inferior oblique. Okay. So those are those extrinsic eye muscles. Now, as far as, let's look at this image here. And this image is good in that you're seeing, so we have here the white of your eye, the sclera, the fibrous tunic, with the cornea, right, the clear portion. You'll see here that then we have the iris, the pigmented portion of the eye, that is a muscle that creates this opening, this hole, this pupil, okay? And then you'll see here as far as the choroid layer, which would be the brown vascular middle layer. It's stained brown because it's pigmented, folks. This helps prevent scatter, okay, of light as it enters into the eye. So we have fibrous tunic, vascular tunic, then the inner neural tunic is this tan structure here called the retina. And within the retina, we have what's called the optic disc. The optic disc is the area where the cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve, will exit from this area and go to the brain as far as to the thalamus, sending information to the thalamus, and then eventually to the occipital lobe of the brain, which is the visual cortex. You'll see here as far as we have the lens, we have here these white lines represent the suspensory ligaments. The red represents the ciliary muscle. Okay. And then I'm going to show you another image for the fovea, which would be a purple dot. When you see our model, it's a purple dot on the retina, and that would be the fovea, which is the central portion, the bullseye of the macular region. Again, these are all cones in this region, okay? In particular, the fovea. And then anything distal would be rods. So rods are for your low vision, night vision, peripheral vision, The cones are for your sharp vision, your central vision, your color vision. You'll see here as far as the vitreous humor, aka the vitreous body, it's gelatinous in our eyes, but for the model, it's just a white, a clear structure. So clear spherical structure. It allows for, and it gives the eyeball to have its, it helps to keep the eyeball, just give it its shape, really. That's simple as to put it. But, and really allowing for the retina not to detach. You've probably heard the term detached retina, and this is not a good thing. This would be a medical emergency, and it can really lead to blindness if, as a result of some type of injury, that the retina detaches from the choroid layer and such. And again, too, issues with the vitreous humor, that could also be a contributing factor to problems with the retina. I would like to show you the fovea. Okay. Let's see, because on our model, it's like a purple dot. Here you go. So this is a lateral, and what you're seeing here is, so here's the lens. Here's the lens. Here's that ciliary muscle, suspensory ligaments in white. Okay. Here would be the iris, because the iris creates this pupil, this opening. And here we have the retina, and here is the fovea centralis of the macula. So the region outside of the purple dot would be the macular region. And here would be the optic disc. The optic disc is your blind spot, because this is the area where there are no, right? So right here, number 5, there are no rods or cones. There are no photoreceptors there, because this is where the nerves come together to form the cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. Okay. Okay, yeah. All right, so that's what we're looking at as far as the eye anatomy is concerned. And then as far as here, as far as ear anatomy, the eye and ear are really not too bad, folks. I think I said this to the other class that, and I've said this to subsequent classes I've taught in the past years, as far as A&P 1 and 2 are concerned, I find A&P 2 to be a little bit easier for you all to do, because you've already had the stress of A&P 1 and having to process a lot of information in a short period of time, muscular system, all the bones and the parts of the bones. There's a lot of memorization going on there. So coming to A&P 2, you're a little bit more prepared, and so it seems to go by much easier for you all. But not everybody, but I would say on the whole, that's the case. Ear anatomy model. Right. Here's the good one. Okay, so let's make this bigger. Okay. And so this is really pretty straightforward. So you have the external ear, the middle ear, and then you have the inner ear. Okay. External ear, we have this pinna, aka auricle. Okay. Two terms we can use for this: the external ear, auricle, aka the pinna. Question? We have a question?
Yeah, I don't see anything with the ear. I see the eye still.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still see the eye.
Yeah. Okay. What do you see right now?
The
Here's
last
the
image,
eye.
yeah, with the numbers.
That's weird. Okay. Let me take us out of. Shut this. Okay. Let me stop sharing for a moment. I'll bring us all back. Then let me reshare my screen. Do you see this image now of the ear?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes it glitches. Sorry about that. So we have the ear here, okay? So as we're looking at this image, we can see external ear, middle ear, inner ear, okay? So 3 regions for the ear, 3 regions, okay? So we have here the auricle, aka the pinna. See, it says pinna. Auricle, aka the pinna. The external auditory meatus or external acoustic meatus or auditory canal. I mean, there's multiple terms that we can use to describe this region right here, okay? But it's external needs to preface it, okay? Then we have the tympanic membrane. This is the eardrum, okay? But don't give me the eardrum, say tympanic membrane, right? Write that down. And then I'll look at an image in a moment there to give you a better image of the ossicles of the ear. But here we have the auditory tube, aka the eustachian tube, also known as the pharyngeotympanic tube, okay? This is the tube that will pop, will open, and equalize the pressure in the middle ear, okay? So you hear that popping when you change elevations, that's that auditory tube, the eustachian tube that's opening up, popping, opening, closing, okay? Now, as far as this image, I'll show you a better image of the inner ear, but just look at, you'll see here where you can see semicircular canals. This is the vestibule for your sense of balance and equilibrium. And you'll see also for your sense of hearing, the cochlea, as far as it looks like a shell. Now, let's minimize that. Let's just come here. And let's look at the ossicles. So as we look at the ossicles, in situ, right? Okay, can you see that? Okay. Are we good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So this is just showing you a different way as far as the right ear is concerned. But again, auricle, aka the pinna, external auditory canal, acoustic canal, acoustic meatus, but external needs to be the first word there. Then we have here as far as the tympanic membrane, and then here we have the ossicles, the malleus, the incus, the stapes. On the model, what you'll see is that the stapes will be connected to the vestibule, right? Because it's covering what? The oval window. It's covering the oval window. So you'll have the tympanic membrane that'll have these 2 bones, malleus and the incus. Then the stapes will be connected to the vestibular region of the inner ear. Okay, so here's the cochlea. Here's the semicircular canals, vestibular area. Oval window is covered by the footplate of the stapes. And then I'll show you another image regarding the round window, which should be in this region over here, okay? And you'll see here that we have cranial nerve number 8, the vestibulocochlear nerve. So here's the vestibular portion, here's the cochlear portion of cranial nerve number 8. And here we have that eustachian tube equalizing the pressure in the middle ear. Let's look at an image for the round window. Just trying to see if I can show you on one of the anatomical models. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll have to show you. Oh, here we go. Good, good. Here we go. Okay. So here we go. As far as on this model here, you're seeing that we have the round window on the underside aspect of the vestibular portion, the vestibule. Okay. So cochlea, vestibule, here are the semicircular canals. Round window. Okay. And here would be then what you're looking at as far as the oval window. So the oval window would be covered by the footplate of the stapes. So malleus, incus, stapes, oval window.